Okay, testing 1, 2. Mono Sanmarani, hello, how's it? Good evening. Apologies for starting 10 minutes late. Please thank ACECOM for me when you get a opportunity. But nonetheless, we're here. Again, apologies for being late. Again, this is Liberty and Friends on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Usually, we go on for about 90 minutes, but we're going to shorten that a little bit this evening. And let's call it an even 70 minutes because we have the panel, as we always do, the Friends panel waiting in the background. Let me get to them in an absolute second. Let me just test my systems. Guys, you must just bear with me, please. Everything just literally has come back on in the last minute. Branding falling here and all that good stuff. Bear with me, folks. And indeed, as you're bearing with me, do me that favor by hitting the like button. Smash that like button right now. And whether you're watching the simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter, subscribe, please, on YouTube to the show. Help me grow my numbers and reach my goal of 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I think we've just broached that 43,000 number. And of course, don't forget, we have a website. Find us, please, at bigdaddyliberty.com. Now, with that being said, let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of tonight's show, which is the Friends panel tonight on Liberty and Friends. To help us unpack what has been the news week, we have the host, of course, of the Dumo Denga show. My apologies, I meant the ManPatria cast. That is Dumo Denga. Dumo, good evening, Baba.
Good evening, Sihle. Hope you can hear me. I hope my audio is good. It's been a while, but always good to come on here. Yeah, maybe I should change to the Dumo Denga show. Thanks for the ideas. I think that was a long time coming.
That's what happens when literally the mind is just coming back on. That's what Dumo Denga, of course. As I'm just troubleshooting tonight's show again, let me just apologize to the viewers. I have not had an opportunity to troubleshoot and do my usual sound and video test. So the first 5 minutes of the show might be a bit choppy and have some issues, but we'll sort it out. We are building it as we fly. Speaking about building it as we fly, here's a chap who builds a solid argument and demolishes the stupid arguments that you often see on social media. He is a co-host on the ManPatria podcast, Koketso, Resane. There he is, Bafo. Good evening.
Hey everyone, again no sound test, so I hope I sound okay. Let me know if it sounds bad.
It is sounding absolutely pashash, Brazo. Welcome to the show. Good evening to you. Here's a fellow who hasn't been on the show in a while. A fellow who I know is very, very popular, as I see him cutting out here in my little panel. But he's from the Institute of Race Relations, or Terence Corrigan. Let me give that a bash. He might be having some connection issues, but nonetheless, Terence Corrigan is one of the senior analysts at the Institute of Race Relations. You also find him at their social media presence. That's the Daily Friend at www.dailyfriend.co.za. All right, we're having a few tech issues with Terence there, no problem. Speaking about tech and tech savvy, here's someone who helps me with all things social media. He is someone who is the host of his own show, the Joe Emilio Show, as the name suggests. Oh, Joe Emilio. Joe, good evening.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I was on mute. Good to see everybody again. I'm alive and well. Yes, and a Dumo Denga show and Koketso being part of the Dumo Denga show, I think it's a great idea.
I don't know, maybe that Supreme Victory will make it happen. Shout out to the hashtag Supreme Victory, man. I've been watching that on social media and enjoying that series. I'll call it a series. Do more. Guys, before I get us into tonight's show, Just a reminder to my viewers, this is the one long format show that I have. So sit back, buckle up, get iets wat warm is to drink, a nice warm or hot drink, as we say in English, and sit back and let us, pardon me, the panel, the Liberty, if you will, and friends unpack what has been a very busy news week. Guys, I must begin here at the top of what has been a busy, let's call it week and a half now. The South African Police Services VIP unit, the absolute thuggery that we saw play out on the side of the N1 here in Johannesburg. I won't play the video because it demonetizes the channel. But here are these three individuals, from what we saw in the video at least, three individuals pulled out by these 8 or so VIP police protection detail officers of the Deputy President, Upon Mashatile, and beaten to a literal pulp on the side of the road. And you could see, Dumo, that that whole scene, pardon me, there was nothing police-like about it. There was nothing professional about it. These were thugs driven by ego and a testosterone saying, we'll show these citizens who we are.
Yeah, it definitely looked like that. I mean, I didn't see the build-up to that incident. So to be fair, to be honest, I did not see what led up to that. But if you got a lot of guys surrounding people and kicking and punching and everything like that, really, it's not to stop a threat. For me, what it looks like, it's to teach them a lesson, almost like some sort of street justice. You know what I mean? And I just think that, you know, if you want to implement some sort of street justice against people that are unarmed, we don't even know if they were armed, maybe they were, but the reality is that it doesn't look good for a bystander who's looking at the situation. And this is another thing. I mean, now people will say, I think, well, let me put it this way. I think that this situation arose because of the fact that they are a VIP protection unit. They probably thought that no one was recording, but thank God that people do have dash cams. So guys, if you don't have a dash cam, I think that video is a very good reason why you should have a dash cam. They are very useful because people think that no one is watching, and that's exactly what happened. They went ahead. They probably have done it before and they didn't get caught. And now that this is on social media, the government has to go and actually do something about it. So I'd like to see how this is going to play out. I've got a feeling that what might happen is that they'll say, oh yeah, we spoke to them, they're not going to do it again. They've been suspended. Should someone lay assault charges on them? Not sure what the law states, but it'll be very interesting to see how this actually turns out in the end. But the way it looks, I got a feeling that they might get a slap on the wrist, but I could be wrong.
And I think that last sentence is instructive. And it's a fear that most South Africans have. That effective two-tiered justice system, that two-tiered discipline system, if you will, in this country. Already from the very beginning, there was the feeling, Dumo, that we're heading in that direction, with SAPS basically not coming out instantly and saying, yes, these are our chaps. We're not only suspending them, but we've instituted disciplinary action, but more importantly, laid charges against them. It took a good solid 4 or 5 days before anybody heard anything anywhere vaguely near along those lines. The initial response by SAPS was very mealy-mouthed, say, oh, well, you know, we've taken them off the security detail. They're now sitting behind desks, pending, of course, some form of disciplinary action. Speaking about discipline, let me be disciplined and just bring my other friend panelist on tonight. He is, of course, from the Institute of Race Relations, Terence, Corrigan. Terence, good evening. Sound check.
Hi. So sorry about the sound issue.
Perfect. We can hear you absolutely well. Terence, maybe as I'm on this actual issue, you know, we're sitting here with a situation where, let's be frank, Terence, that image we saw of those 8 heavily armed with rifles and guns, VIP, SAPS police officers beating up 3 citizens on the side of the road, an image filled with bravado, that was the state putting a boot on the neck of not only those 3 men, but of citizens. The state basically saying, watch out. If you don't comply with what we want, we can easily punish you and break your rights.
Yeah, well, look, there were 2 things that I saw in that. The first was brutality, but beneath that there was contempt. It was like, I can do this, just saw me. And I think that I think the operative image wasn't so much laying into these guys like it was some sort of skinhead, beating a Nigerian immigrant in Manchester, or a mob enforces, the mob bosses and forces, but that we. The way they sort of then just, like shifted their jackets back on, walked in and just drove off. That there was, just like, well, we finished dispensing whatever it is we came here to dispense. It's also, this is also a case of the dog that didn't bark. Where was the arrest? If this guy had done something so, ferocious that it required the full coercive might of the state, well, then take him in, lock him up, throw the book at him. But all they did was throw a couple of boots at him. This is emblematic of a, I don't know, a situation where you can't tell governance from criminality, where the 2 kind of bleed in and mutually infect one another.
Terence, where it got really scary for me, and I'm going to throw it to you, Koketso, was the glee, the bloodlust, if you will. In one particular officer, I called him Mr. Grey Socks on Wednesday's show when I unpacked this issue with Gideon Hubert. This chap, this particular police officer, he's the one who drags the one individual, proceeds to kick him in the face. He passes out, and then as he passes out, holds onto the railing for a second to jump on that man's face, and then walks away with a very sort of smug, self-satisfied, as he puts his pistol back into his holster demeanor. A sick, almost, I really needed that type demeanor from someone who's a police officer, Koketso, who took an oath to protect, actually, people like that, their constitutional rights, our life, liberty, and property rights, if anything. What's going on here, Koketso? Why aren't these individuals vetted? Is it a training issue? Like, what's been your view on this?
Yeah, I think for me, the most standout issue with that entire incident was how it was multiple, let's call them officers. It was multiple officers actually all involved there, and there isn't a single sign of any one of the others trying to maybe say, okay, we've done enough, or, maybe this is too much, or all right, let's stop it right here. Who knows how this could have actually gone on for. So for me, it just tells me that I think, like Terence has just mentioned, A, they've done this before. B, they'll do it again, and C, this is standard procedure for them. So again, it shows a disregard for the people they have sworn an oath to actually protect. They don't see us as citizens whom they should serve. They rather see us as a means to get out your anger, or a means to remind us, the citizenry, that we are nothing more than ordinary taxpayers who do not have the same kind of privileges that they do. I mean, you had officers stepping out of the vehicles, rifles out even, against what looked like, 2 gentlemen who may have done something wrong prior. But regardless, you've got officers coming out with their rifles out, smartly dressed, and then laying hands to really demonstrate to a citizen that, you are nothing, actually. At the end of the day, we do what we want, and we will do what we want, and we are doing what we want. And there's nothing you can do about it because A, you're outnumbered, B, you're unarmed, and C, this is not the first time we're doing this, nor will you be the last victim. So yeah, for me, it just tells me really that at the end of the day, they don't really see us, the citizens, as people who they should actually serve. They just see us as, an inconvenience on the motorway when they are traveling at high speed with blue lights on.
And again, that's what I find frightening here, because you've got to understand, these are people who we fund at the end of the day. If you look at the overall budget within the South African police service, no one gets a slice, if you will, of the cake, the funding cake that is bigger than those VIP protection guys. I've always said this on the show. South Africa is a two-tiered society where you and I as citizens are struggling to get the basics from the state, and that's presuming you believe the state should exist at all. Remember, this show does cater to as far as ideological spectrum as anarchists, but nonetheless, whether you believe the state should exist or not, the one role of the state is to protect the ordinary citizen, to protect their rights, and to do so by having a sole monopoly on violence, on society. That's what we give, at least the power to the state. And the understanding, of course, of that is that the state will then use that power, that resource, if you will, to have a functional police service, a functional justice system that basically handles those who infringe on our life, liberty, and property rights. Now, I'm setting this whole scene because I'm trying to create the picture here that you need to see, which is who then, with that power that's given to the state, who gets the lion's share of that protection of the state? It's not you, dear citizen, it's the politicians. Let me be precise and specific. Joe, I'll come to you in a moment. I want to put this on screen. As I'm doing that, guys, remember, hit that like button, please, whether you're watching the simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. There it is. 3.4 billion rand for VIP protection a year in this country. Politicians never skimp on themselves. I've said this before on the show. If I go down on this particular article, which is in the Daily Investor, it paints the picture. According to Wayne Duvenage, or Duvenage, as one say in South Africa, the Organization of Undoing Tax Abuse, their CEO, when told ENCA that 3.4 billion rand was spent on VIP protection for politicians. As I go back, there we go, in the 2023 financial year, a figure that even far outweighs the 2.25 billion allocated to the Hawks, the actual unit that's designed to catch serious and violent criminals, the big fish in this country. You're more likely to have a politician protected in this country than actually see a massive criminal, if you will. If I extrapolate from this number, it's not actual fact what I'm saying. I'm just extrapolating. Joe, I have to come to you. When I look at this sort of number, politicians never skimp on themselves, do they?
No, we've often seen this many times. I mean, even with load shedding, right? We've seen headlines where ministers have been deemed essential workers, so they don't get load shedding. Even some rumors have been going around that the taxpayer money or the taxpayers pay for generators and so on and so forth to make sure that ministers don't suffer from load shedding. So in a way, I'm not surprised about this 3 billion odd budget for ministers to have protection. And this is something that Gideon Joubert and guys like Ian Cameron from Action Society have spoken about time and time again, about how Koketso has like armed bodyguards around him 24/7 pretty much, and all of them armed to the teeth, but yet 80 people in South Africa die a day and there's no protection for them, because if they go to the SAPS, well, sometimes SAPS doesn't even have ink to print any of the dockets. In most cases, the guns that are confiscated get back into circulation with the gangs or sold to the gangsters. And a lot of the times when women are raped and they go and complain, they don't have a rape kit at the SAPS, or they get told, well, what did you do wrong? It's disgusting. And it just shows you where the priorities are, that the ministers of South Africa don't actually care one little bit about the South African people. And what makes this incident even more, I'm gonna be a bit controversial right now, Sikhle, because I'm gonna say it's disappointing, but not for the reasons you might think. I think it's very disappointing, and Terence alluded to it when he was talking. It's very disappointing about the outrage that South Africans have towards this incident, because that gentleman that got brutally assaulted could have died. I mean, he's probably near death. One more kick to the head could have done it. One incorrect punch to the nose could have done it. And in lockdown, I think it was during lockdown, during that horrible time, a man, okay, fine, fair enough, he did die. A man that was put under a knee died from police brutality, basically. And the whole world, the entire world, was up in arms. The entire world started rioting, especially in America. Billions of dollars were lost, businesses being burnt down, outrage upon outrage upon outrage. And fair enough, this guy died. I'm not going to go into the whole story. We all are aware with what happened there, George Floyd. But my point is, in South Africa, we have a somewhat similar situation. Police brutality, an innocent man, gets really badly beat up here, along with his colleague or friend or whoever it was. And people are just like, okay, we're angry about it, but okay. And then they get told, yeah, the cops are going to be suspended with pay or whatever the case might be, or just suspended, or they're at a desk or whatever. And nobody does anything. I'm not encouraging violence. I'm not saying that people should go out and burn buildings and businesses and stuff like that. But at what point are we going to say enough is enough? Because like I said earlier, we have been shown almost every day how ministers only care about themselves, how the ANC only cares about them. And you know what? It's not just the ANC. It's actually all the politicians. Like you always say, 68 politicians are trash. So all the politicians in South Africa do not give a damn about South Africans. And I think we've been shown this time and time and time again over the past 30 years since the liberation of South Africa. And I just question, dear South African, every single South African watching this right now, when are you going to say enough is enough? If load shedding isn't enough, if lockdown isn't enough, if this police brutality isn't enough, crime stats aren't enough, rape capital of the world isn't enough, when are you going to say enough is enough?
And again, that is the question here. I'm going to come to you in a moment, Terence. I'm just going to put something on screen here, which maybe gives a bit more context, gives the latest on the issue. Indeed, with Joe alluding to it, those 8 police officers, as I'd mentioned prior to Joe speaking, have, of course, been placed on a suspension of sorts. Basically, the police coming out and saying, oh, we've removed them from the security detail of Paul Mashatile, that's the deputy president of the country. They are basically manning desks until we sort this issue out. But the one institution of state that has not been mincing its words and has been quite active on this issue is the police watchdog. That's the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, which has actually said from the jump, what the hell is this? We're investigating, and heads will very well roll. What's the latest on that particular front? Well, IPID basically saying we've charged these police officers. No word as to whether they've arrested them, but definitely they're being charged with assault with the intention of grievous bodily harm. I think that's the expression. Basically malicious damage to property, as those particular officers, when they cornered that blue polo, proceeded to smash the windows trying to get to the occupants of that video, and of course various gun-related charges related to the pointing of a firearm in what was effectively no need to do anything like that. Now, I'm speaking about the states of, or rather the institutions of state that have either done really well or failed us in the response to this issue. SAPS, of course, as we know, mealy-mouthed from the beginning, with the asshat of a police minister having not issued a statement, pardon me, since the beginning of that incident. That's one institution that really received a flop or a moomish of the week moment. The other institution I've just mentioned is IPID, of course, which have been the only ones really that have been on the ball here. And the third one, of course, that we've now found out is the South African National Defence Force, which is involved in this matter because the 4 individuals, I should say, who were attacked in that vehicle, we now know are SANDF or Defence Force members in one capacity or the other. Tonight we're meant to have Ian Cameron from Action Society joining us, only because this particular statement was something they issued this week. Let me just make sure it's on screen. Give it a hot second there. There we go. You see the headline there. Motorists who were assaulted by the VIP police on the N1 were allegedly prohibited by the Defence Force from speaking about the attack. What's that all about, you're wondering? Well, let me go down to a very quick quote here. The motorists, of course, assaulted on the NY have been allegedly prohibited by their employer, the South African National Defence Force, from speaking to one about the attack unless a general that is present. This is according to Civil Organizations Action Society, which is representing one of the victims in civil litigation to be pursued against the police. In a statement on Friday, Ian Cameron said that the alleged order remained even after hours in their personal capacity. Now, this raises all sorts of issues here, Terence, about freedom of expression and really the basic freedoms of these individuals, because they were not attacked because they're South African National Defence Force soldiers. So on what basis does the SANDF gag these particular three members?
Well, look, I can't. I'm not a legal guy, but it seems to me that would fall foul of a number of constitutional stipulations. I know that there have been a number of court cases and challenges to military recruitment policies and things like that, on the basis that although these might be sort of standard in militaries worldwide, South Africa's constitution doesn't extend, those sort of restrictions to its own citizens. And as far as I'm aware, if you are subjected to some sort of, let's say, garden variety act of assault, as a citizen, you have full recourse to the law. This didn't happen in the confines of a military base, which would fall under military justice. So yeah, the idea that a rifleman or a lance corporal or whatever is going to have a general in the room, that just seems to me to be, well, questionable. The point I just wanted to make in relation to what Joe was saying is that I'm old enough to remember 1991. For those of you who, to your great fortune, do not have my years, that was the year of the notorious Rodney King video, where a motorist in Los Angeles was taken down by 4 police officers using their billy clubs. And I couldn't help thinking that there was a certain symmetry here. The difference, though, was in that case, these people were actually using tools of their trade. In this case, they were using, the techniques of a street thug. The other thing I'd also like to just pick up on is what Emilio said about George Floyd. I spoke to a very engaging group of matric students a few weeks ago on the question of news and news reporting, and I asked them, okay, can anyone tell me who George Floyd was? Every hand in the class went up. I said, you would tell me who Collins Causa was? One timid hand went up. And I said, now it's interesting that we are aware of an abuse meted out in a city in a foreign country, and I guarantee, like, virtually no one in this. Well, actually, there was one guy from America, so he could probably have found Minneapolis on a map. Whereas what is inflicted by agents of the state to which you are subject, you don't know. I'll throw another question. We all know who Derek Chauvin was. The trial was on the news. Has anybody ever heard the names of the two soldiers who beat George Floyd, Collins Causa, to death for the sin of having a beer in his yard during lockdown? Looks like some lives do matter more than others, eh?
That's right. I mean, I nearly used the expression delicious irony. A tragic irony perhaps is a more apt description of this, where people don't recognize the state is not your friend. Government is not your friend. How many times do classical liberals, libertarians, anarchists, the guys you hear on this show, who say this to you day in, day out, the state is a dangerous, dangerous tool that should be treated with kid gloves, or rather, correction, which should be treated by citizens with hard gloves that limit its power. How many times do you hear us say that for you to then see these sort of incidents and for you to get that particular image? Guys, I'm going to move us on, unless there's anybody who wants to take another bite here, because another issue has cropped up this week that I really need us to talk about, because it speaks to the integrity of the election in this country, where, again, tonight has been defined by a conversation about our state institutions. Here's one state institution, what the formerly known Independent Electoral Commission. They've dropped the independent from their name. Now they just call themselves EC. The Electoral Commission, pardon me, coming out this week, pumping its chest, saying, look at us, it says. We've signed a nice agreement with these social media cartel companies. They're going to help us sift through, online at least, what is and isn't. That is, what is real information and what is, as this popular euphemism now, disinformation. Hey, let me just put this up on screen so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. As I do that, please hit that like button, guys. I don't say this for my health. I actually say this because I really mean it. Hit that like button and help grow my numbers. This is, of course, the tweet they put out this week, looking rather glam or gleeful, rather. You can see there. I think you can see. Hang on, let me just make it full screen. Yes, much better. The IEC Commission CEO, Usei Mamabolo, signing a framework of cooperation with, here's the kicker, Google, Media Monitoring Africa, Meta, that's of course Facebook, Instagram, and others, and of course TikTok, the Chinese-owned state, effectively near on state social media app. For more information, read on this particular piece, and of course, let me get into that. Before I do, you've got to have a look at this image. Look at how glam and happy everybody and gleeful everybody looks here. It's very nice, isn't it? They know. For those of us who have serious issues with these social media companies, you look at these smiles and you're like, yeah, I know what the smile is about. This has nothing about protecting the integrity of elections 2024. These guys have a track record of themselves spreading and controlling narratives around elections, circa America, the last election. Ask any of these companies where Hunter Biden's laptop was at the time. Was that information coming out? But before I get into this, let me not get ahead of myself. Let's go to that press release that I mentioned, where they speak about this framework of cooperation in rather glowing terms. Guys, bear with me, please. It takes a second to do this. It's not as smooth as I often make it out to be. It should pop up on screen in a moment. There it is. Right, so the IEC, or the Electoral Commission, has once again partnered with social media giants Google, Meta, and TikTok, and a non-profit organization called Media Monitoring Africa, who we'll come to in a moment. To curb, they say, disinformation ahead of South Africa's 2024 national and provincial education. See, clearly, my education failed me there for a moment. Election is what I meant to say. The burgeoning use of digital media in recent years has seen corresponding surge in digital disinformation, particularly on social media platforms. Electoral processes have not been spared, they say. Left unchecked, a very concerning statement. This phenomena stands to undermine the conduct of credible information. Disinformation, as defined, is false, inaccurate, or misleading information designed to intentionally cause harm within an election context. This includes false information intended to unduly affect participation in the outcome of the elections. Now, what does this whole arrangement do? Let me just cut to the chase before I go back to the panel. What's this framework all about? What will it be empowered to do? Well, the salient points of the framework include the following. It establishes cooperation during the election period in good faith. Secondly, it is a collaborative framework that respects existing laws and does not require sharing of confidential user data. Thirdly, it aligns with the South African Constitution, the Electoral Act, and the Electoral Code of Conduct. Notice how the first three bullet points are so defensive already, but nonetheless, it supports the establishment of a working group, this is the meat and potatoes, between the partners, promotes access to accurate information, conduct of awareness campaigns on elections, and provides training to political parties, election candidates, and other key election stakeholders on addressing, quote, disinformation. And here's the kicker. It allows online platforms to implement policies and processes such as content removal, advisory warnings, and delisting of address delisting to address, pardon me, disinformation. Now, here's where it gives certain organizations, one NGO, real power. Now, remember Media Monitoring Africa? Well, they trade as real411.org. It enables signatories to cooperate with the IEC and MMA in initiatives including real411.org, which is a complaints platform, and padre.co.za, transparent repository of political advertisements to combat disinformation. End of quote. Now, as I come back here, Joe, I see you waving frantically here. I'll come to you and then I'll come to Dumo. Guys, remove my skepticism. There's something to be said about the Electoral Commission of South Africa almost taking a tone as though these social media are cartels, which I like to call them, are somehow impartial or objective and can be trusted with being arbiters of what is true and what isn't. Joe, there's a problem here.
Oh, there's a huge problem, man. This is lockdown 2.0, right? In a way, because we saw the same kind of stuff happen during lockdown, during the US elections, during that time where we had what's it called? Like Facebook, basically coming down on you hard if you said anything incorrect about the spicy cough. And it wasn't just Facebook, it was all platforms. YouTube especially was one. I mean, Dumo, Koketso, me, and Sichle are going to be heavily affected. We basically can't report on anything next year. It might be too dangerous. It might be misinformation. And then our channels could be taken down. This is ridiculous, actually. And it just blatantly shows you how badly the ANC wants to win the elections next year. I mean, if you just look at previous elections, not just national, but also municipal elections, we saw a lot of videos out there last time where ballots were missing or ballots were in plastic bags being thrown everywhere or just appearing out of nowhere. Who's to say now that if those same videos come out this next year and they're legit, they're actually legit, but now you have 411 saying, no, that's from 2019 or it's from the last year's election. It's misinformation. It's not happening this time. How would they even know? Because remember, fact checkers are human beings. They're being paid to say a certain thing. They're being paid to research, but not everybody researches perfectly. So even the fact checkers need to be fact checked. And judging by what happened during lockdown and during the US elections, they definitely cannot be trusted. I mean, not many years, but I mean, a year or two after we were penalized on our YouTube channels for some of the things we were saying, now YouTube's taking away the penalization because it turns out we were right from the very beginning. Now the truth kind of comes out, but by this time, everybody's kind of forgotten about it. And I think the same thing is going to happen. This is nothing but a power trip for the ANC to try and make sure that they make every possible attempt to try and win and sway people to think a certain way, to control the narrative, and unfortunately try and take 2024, make it a win for them.
I'm going to go one step further here. Dumo, I want to come to you. There's two questions I really have here. And again, I'm trying my level best to be the fair host in this. I really do have a problem with this, guys. I really do have a problem with this because it's courting a problem that didn't exist, if I'm to be brutally honest. Why do we need the IEC to partner up with social media companies to tell us as South Africans or to help decipher as South Africans what is true and not true? Why are we allowing what is effectively a Chapter 2 constitutional rights in this country, Bill of Rights, which is freedom of expression, to be filtered through these social media companies that have a lot of power on the online space? Dumo, you have an IEC here, and they engaged me, to their fairness. They engaged me on social media when I questioned them about this nonsense. The one thing they couldn't answer is, how do you know any of these social media companies are as impartial as they're suggesting they are? Why trust them?
Yeah, I you know what? Whenever I see the word real 411, I get very worried. I think on social media, they do have a reputation. And, I look at their Twitter account, it only has like 700 followers. and then on their website you can you can make complaints, and then they'll give outcomes in these complaints. I don't know. I'm not really confident in their ability to fact check, and I think I'm not the only one in the room who thinks that. I think, let's be honest. I mean, I wouldn't take them seriously. I wouldn't take their assessments very seriously. Another problem is that, who makes you the arbiter of truth? I mean, at the end of the day, when you say that we are going to check disinformation and ensure that we address all forms of disinformation, well, then that means you decide what is disinformation, right? It's not that disinformation exists to you, it's just that you decide. And sometimes when you are proven wrong, you're not going to go back and say, oh, sorry, we're wrong about this. So I think this is just one of those things where people are trying to show that, look, we appreciate democracy and we love fairness, but they're not really doing anything. I won't be surprised if there's money involved and stuff like that. I mean, it just sounds to me, I'm just very, very, what's the right word? I'm very skeptical. So for those of you who are watching, just ignore Real 411. Don't take them seriously. We know, look what happened during COVID. We saw what happened there. They had some stuff there, and really, you saw some of the rulings on the cases that they brought forward. Come on, don't take them seriously. We've seen it. We've seen everything, right? So in my opinion, I just think that as long as they don't have any sort of, like, let's say, hold on the law, then I'm okay with that. They can say whatever they want to say. But I'm just going to mute them because, it'll just make my timeline a bit better.
Yours and I both. But here's the problem. And this is the nub of the issue. Koketso, when I come to you, it's the positioning of these organizations by the IEC as being somehow central to determining what is proper or right or factual information versus what they like, this euphemism that's become very popular in this a very Orwellian age of disinformation, giving them almost unfettered power to decide what is and what isn't. And here's where the IEC messes up for me. There's no addressing or even consciousness or awareness from their side to say, hang on, how about I do my research as the Electoral Commission of South Africa on these particular organizations, both the social media ones and the companies who they partner with, to decipher online at least what is good information or disinformation. There's a lack of awareness by IEC here. And again, I don't like doing this. I really don't like doing this. But for the sake of the conversation, I just thought, let me put this organization up on screen and their particular funders. Now, I must say this. I myself am in partnership with an organization that itself receives donor funding, but and as it should be transparent about that funding, as the media monitoring guys are here. I mean, you're watching it on screen. But the one thing I always question, even with the organization I'm partnered with, is how much influence do their donors have on the organization? Now, the Institute of Race Relations, I can speak with confidence and say almost zero influence on them. Indeed, there's a very famous fight that I'll let Terence speak about between one funder of the IRR that wanted it to comply to BEE. And the IRR basically saying, stuff you and your money. We will do exactly what we do. So there's a protection, if you will, from what the organization does from its donors. And there's no influence, undue influence. Do I have the same guarantee from Media Monitoring Africa, especially when I see the likes of, as you can see there, the Open Society Foundation there, the George Soros types money going into this organization? Why should I trust MMA Africa, Koketso?
Look, I think you're right to bring much of this up. And again, you're not the only one with that concern. I have the exact same concern, actually. Look, let me be frank here and actually address the elephant in the room here. There's an element of patheticism in the Independent Electoral Commission that they firstly have to outsource the function of executing on their mandate, right? From the News 24 article, they They were quick to outline again, and like you mentioned, be very defensive about it, because that is actually what is in line with the reason they exist, and really part and parcel of their function, at the very least, outside of the usual election cycles. But they are in effect outsourcing the function of actually making sure that elections are free and fair, and that the public discourse between election participants is done in a free and fair manner. They are outsourcing that to an NGO, which we now know is foreign funded. For me, it's actually pathetic that they can't actually do this on their own. It reminds me of what we see time and time again, in that you will find a government, this is an example where a government department will hire a team of auditors. They'll have 20, 25 odd auditors. And then over and above that, they're still going to outsource to a private auditing firm who's going to deploy 3, 4 individuals to do the entire work of a whole department. More often than not, better than the 25 people who are actually employed there. So again, if you look at the IEC's books, you'll find that there are people who are employed to do the exact kind of work that they are actually outsourcing, this time around to Real 411, and I forget what the other one is. Second point here is that if you look at the donors, right? So Real 411, of course, they have some pretty lofty donors in the Open Society Foundation, UNESCO, that other group, I forget their name now, as well. Press Council is listed as one of their sponsors too. All that money, and Real 411 still has a website that looks like it was designed by a child. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt in that there's an SSL certificate at the very least. But just browse through that site and you'll actually quickly see that, they are handling complaints. But when you look at the complaints which have been filed, it looks like any Tom, Dick, and Harry could, within a few mouse clicks, actually register a complaint, and it's actually going to stick and is even viewable to the public before it has actually been vetted by a human being to determine if this is valid or not. Are these the same people who will then who we are made to believe have the necessary competence to offer this as a service to the body which is responsible to ensure that we have free and fair election? Third point, and this is the last one here, is that, again, according to that News 24 article, the IEC is basically saying on that first sentence that they are partnering with these organizations again. That infers that this is not the first time. So what exactly happened last time that warrants them to be employed to offer this kind of service, at least on a repeat basis? And firstly, if that's the case, then why don't we as the public have a little bit more information regarding the brilliant work that Real 411 and its types have done in the past? For me, it sounds like this was a handshake agreement done in a boardroom where Real 411 and their proponents basically said that this is the work that we do, this is the work that we have done in the past, and we should do the same for you. But we are not made privy to those details as the public. Instead, we are served an announcement with the stunning photo there of certain individuals smiling for the camera to basically look like they are brokering a deal for the benefit of society. That's really not what's happening here. IEC is outsourcing to a shadowy organization with lofty funders but pathetic infrastructure and no real track record of demonstrable success in what they do in the first place. And we're supposed to sit back and say, right, this is a good move? Absolutely not. So yeah, let's see how this plays out. But again, those who follow me on other platforms, you will know that this is the kind of thing I like to question regardless.
Well, if I may, look, I work for the Institute of Race Relations, and I've worked for various other organizations, all of which have received donor funding. To me, that's actually not a huge issue. Civil society organizations, think tanks, or whatever, take funds from wherever they can get it, and I'm also not particularly concerned whether there's influence being exerted. I think it often, funding tends to go to like-minded organizations. So if that's, to my mind, if that's a concern for you, then just factor that in. I try to look at the products of what these organizations produce, and to sort of assess them on their merits. Now, as far as the Real 411 thing was concerned, my response is this: I think that there were some that highlighting a real issue. I remember, some of the bizarre stuff that was doing the rounds over COVID. Although why you needed to debunk that, I'm not sure. It just seemed so insane. Some of it, though, the lab leak theory or whatever, was initially written off as conspiracy theory. Now it turns out that there may well be something to that. My concern, I think, is more generic. It's the question of who watches the watchers, and everyone's gonna come with an angle. I was once actually challenged on a radio show, what is your agenda? And I said, look, if you can't pick up my agenda, then I'm not doing my job properly. Stop EWC will travel. I think that the question of media manipulation or whatever, that, by the way, was something the KGB was extremely good at. In the 1980s, they actually set up this narrative that AIDS was created as an American bioweapon, very, very skillfully laundered, and that got a lot of traction, including in South Africa. I think that what's really calls for is cool heads and some analytical thought. If something sounds bizarre, check it out with skepticism. If something sounds too perfect, check it out with skepticism, because generally, something that's too perfect, well, there's usually been some manipulation, I find, to get it to get it looking like that.
At the heart of it here for me, and I take your point, Terence, but I've gone one step beyond, because I took that same approach initially. But here's the thing: these organizations have a track record. Again, I'm speaking more the social media companies here. It's the naivety for me by the IEC, which is stupefying. Them suddenly thinking, and Koketso is right, by the way. On what basis does the IEC outsource this function, which is their constitutional mandate, to these organizations that are not South African, first of all? In other words, they have no real interest, if I'm to be brutally frank, in the affairs, really, of South Africans insofar as the governance structure of South Africa. They're just a social media company. So why are we giving them that power? On what basis do they get to fact check us as South Africans? What if I said something online along the lines of, well, I'm not going to vote for party X because I haven't had water in my area. Now, that statement on its face value is hyperbole, because I'm sure I've had some water at some stage in the area. But this organization might say, well, actually, we're putting a little ding or a notch on this statement because it's partially true, or whatever the case may be. Yada, yada. Like, why is it their place to say that, as opposed to being the role of every South African who listens to me, the role of every South African who engages me, to test, to interrogate, and to go through my statements and to engage freely online without the fear of there being some arbiter out there who's given power effectively. That's what this framework agreement does, given power to decide what is and what isn't. That's my concern here. Why these organizations? I put this concern directly to the IEC in a tweet, and they basically said, well, actually, relax, Big Daddy Liberty. Don't worry too much about Media Monitoring Africa. Everybody has the right to report to Facebook, Meta, and these other organizations on disinformation. But then I asked them the question, if that's the case, why enter into an agreement with them, number one, and why place Media Monitoring Africa in such a prime position? Like, why is this happening is the actual question here, which they're not answering. Okay, so I want to come back to you because you've sent me something here, and I want you to speak to it as I put it on screen. I sounded like Rick Sanchez there. And away we go. I'm sorry, just give me a moment. Let me just put this on screen, please. It takes a second, and as I do that, please hit that like button whether you're watching the simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or I don't know, Twitter. That's what I'm missing here. Koketso, speak to me about this because you asked me to check it out.
So this is one of the pages you see. That's Real 411's website. This is reportedly a list of complaints that have gone in. Remember, they are servicing the IEC. They're offering this as a service. Now, if you just go down on here, on this very page, you'll actually come across a list of the submitted complaints. You know, this is a complaint handling platform. You can even pick this one and just say view complaint there.
Okay, clicking on view complaint. It'll take a second to load.
So assuming then that, yeah, you'll see there's actually a date there, a whole complaint number as well. You can share the complaint too, but essentially, if you look there, there's no title, there's no overview, there's no background and ruling, there's nothing in this, and we'll see in more detail when it opens. But this means that you can just go on this website and keep clicking at your heart's content to just keep logging complaints. And that will rack up the tally numbers in terms of how many complaints Real 411 is handling. But again, like, these really aren't complaints. This is a dumb website. It lacks a professionalism. It doesn't show that the service being offered is actually a working service here. And IEC is willy-nilly happy to sign them up to come and handle our national elections, you know, something which is paramount to our democracy. So even on a meritocracy basis, right, where is the reasoning for Real 411 actually being selected to offer this prime service, like you rightly mentioned earlier? Yeah, see, it's still loading.
Sorry, just bear with me, folks. Yeah,
it also took me
my
this long
system
as
is
well.
lagging, but not so.
So it's a lagging website in general.
Okay, so there's the page you were talking about.
Yeah, so there's a complaint ID. When you look at the complaint details, there's no title. There's a date on there, which is 2 days ago. You can share it. There's nothing on the overview. There's nothing on the background and ruling. There's no assets, whatever that's supposed to be, maybe supporting images, etc. And if you keep going to others, you'll find more of the same. So again, the service they are supposedly offering doesn't seem to be a valuable service in the first place. So I would expect the IEC to handle this sort of thing internally and have their own internal system, of course, but they are outsourcing to a company who is, you know, at their public face, can't even show you the service that they are offering on their very own website. So the competency there's a clear lack of it. So how on earth did Real 411 get in bed with the IEC? That's a question that needs to be asked, but we do know that those who are funding them have key individuals on speed dial, most likely.
Again, I'm more than happy to entertain that particular conversation. And I say this without any contradiction or fear of contradiction, because someone might say, oh, but hang on, you know, you're in partnership with the IRR. Who's to say that the Chinese government and, you know, the Martians who fund the IRR aren't controlling you, Big Daddy Liberty? How do we know you're not a puppet? Hold on, be a real boy. You know, like, I get it, right? And Terence, this is what I wanted to come to you to have that conversation. And I'll come to Dumo and Joe in a second. Give me a second, because I want to make that point, because I think it's an important one. It's one which the former CEO of the Institute of Race Relations used to rather, quite explicitly say, we welcome the funding of big donors, absolutely. However, they don't come to our door expecting something from us. They're funding what we are already doing on the merit of what it is. And that's the part Koketso's questioning when it comes to me, the MMA group and Real 411. What they're doing is really rather dubious in nature. Like we're not seeing a quality product. And what I'm tacking onto that criticism is I then don't even see that separation, if you will, or that insulating of the integrity of their work from their donors. Terence, please just very briefly speak to how the IRR actually does protect the integrity of its work from its donors, regardless of how big their donors are.
Yeah. Okay, look. First off, I'm not really in a position to speak about Media Monitoring Africa. I've looked at some of their stuff. I have mixed feelings, but
Sure.
look, basically, I think if you ask most IRR employees who the funders are, most of them wouldn't know. That's essentially the distance. If you want to go here on the website, there's a shortish list: Millennium Trust, Lombard Insurance Company, Julia Ogilvy Thompson, Johannes van der Horst, Heggie Charitable Trust, Graham McIntosh, Friedrich Naumann Foundation. Although I believe that relationship has now been terminated. So we have sometimes partnered with ideologically similar groups because we share particular concerns. The Naumann Foundation, for instance, is very big on individual and societal freedom, very much the same as ourselves. We have sympathetic business people and companies that have given to us. We will listen to their concerns, but it is understood that they are buying the service that we offer. They are not getting some sort of pay for play service. Now, at one point, we were required to submit for one fairly large funder in the commercial space a racial breakdown of our staff. We said we don't do that. We don't keep those records. Well, no. Just go and walk down the corridor and just make notes. Like who can put a pencil and who can't, whatever. And we said no. And yeah, so eventually we said, okay, well, if this is the condition to get the money, to fill in that form, we'd rather not have the money. Shrug. That's about as concise as I can make it.
Again, rightly so, and I wanted people to hear that story because I can see what's happening in the comment section, and people are very welcome to go to the IRR's website and actually see those funders there. They're not hidden, by the way. Dumo, let me come to you and then Joe, because we're going to move on in a second here. We are in the last, actually, we should have been wrapping the show up, but let's call it we're in the last 10 minutes of the show. Dumo, I think we've exhausted the point. But for me, I think this is a conversation around the integrity of our elections in this country. I, as a citizen, want to know that the IEC has a direct relationship with me, not with some social media company because they happen to have more money, not with some who knows who they are, 411, MMA, blah, 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 NGO. Even if it was the IRR, I would have the same issue with the IEC in this instance. The relationship here should be between me, the voter, and the IEC. Why is that not the priority here?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I think the reason why it's not the priority is probably because the IEC wants to give off the impression that they care about the accuracy of information. But yeah, the actions that they've taken, in my opinion, are not necessary. They could have just, used their Twitter to bust myths, and so forth. They can do their own, fact checking. I don't think that they really need to partner with these social media organizations. It's just not a good idea. As we saw with the Hunter Biden laptop story and everything like that, social media organizations, they tend to be influenced a lot by the state. I mean, if you saw, and what is interesting, they did not have they partnered with Twitter. I don't think they have, and I think one of the reasons why they haven't partnered with them is because Elon Musk has stated that he's going to try and make this as much of a free speech platform as possible. I think he's doing an okay job. There are some questionable decisions that he made, but it makes sense. The reality is that Twitter may not be infiltrated by let me not say the IEC, but it cannot be influenced because when they released those files, they showed how politicians would reach out to them and say, please remove this post, please hide this, please do this, please do that. And that actually showed really how politicians interfere in this. So now, has Facebook done something like that? Probably not, and so forth. And so I just think for me, they partnered with the most questionable organizations, in my opinion, with regards to this. So I just think that if we want to see better information and accurate information, we're going to have to sift through it. You're going to have to be skeptical. You're going to have to question, and you're going to have to think for yourself. And I know during the pandemic, they didn't want us to do that. You know, we had to trust the authorities because we don't want people to die and stuff like that. So in my opinion, you know, I just think that, you know, if the IEC is not going to connect with the voter, then you as the voter, you need to make sure that you are connected to as much information as possible, question a lot of things, and also try to be knowledgeable as well.
Joe, I must come to you as the final gasp here before we move on to our final issue, which is the issue of the construction mafia, from one mafia to another, from the blue light mafia to the construction mafia, but we'll get to that in a moment. Joe, I'll say the quiet part out loud. I don't trust these social media companies. For as much as my bread and butter, arguably, is on them, these are companies who, if you look at the Twitter files, for example, have been shown to have had a very unhealthy relationship with state agents in various countries, actually allowing state agents to enter these organizations and determine what is and what isn't in them. The Twitter files, of course, exposing how agents from the FBI, CIA, etc., were having very plush positions in Twitter, which begs the question, of course, around the integrity of other social media organizations. TikTok, for example, is often openly cited by the Americans, with great irony, of course, as being an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. So why is the IEC suddenly thinking, oh, when they come to South Africa, they're going to play it even Stevens? It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense because the IEC, well, first of all, TikTok being owned by China is favorable for South Africa because we all know South Africa likes communism. So there's a bit of probably a nice deal that they've worked out or whatever. It doesn't surprise me, Sikhle, in a way that this is happening. Like I said earlier, the IEC, the ANC, whatever you want to call it, are just trying to manage and take control of the narrative, the stories that are going to go out there. They want to try and control how you feel, what you think, and especially when it comes to elections. They want to have the image that they are a fair and democratic elections. But this definitely puts that notion into question. As you mentioned, we cannot really trust social media. I don't think a lot of people trust social media. I mean, for those of you who may not know, most social media platforms now are changing the way their algorithm works to the point where if you like something, if you even spend more than 3 seconds watching a video, every single social media platform knows this. And they manipulate that information to keep on sending you content that you like. And why do they do that? Because they want you to stay on the platform for as long as possible. Why? Because then you'll see more ads. Because if anybody's ever seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and I encourage people to go watch it, if something is for free, you are the product. And in The Social Dilemma itself, this documentary explained how the US elections use social media to drive certain narratives. If somebody or some advertisers wanted people to know that Trump was bad, then they got a lot of content that showed that Trump was bad, for example. And who's to say that the same kind of thing is not going to happen in South Africa? Because once the IEC or EC or whatever they're called now is starting to work with social media has a lot of information about you. As much as people want to say papaya and protect themselves as much as possible, there's no doubt that social media still has a database on you. They know what you like. They know what content you like. They know what you watch. They know everything about you. And there is no doubt in my mind that the ANC or the EC or what have you, whoever the elites are, will use that information to manipulate the people as much as possible. I don't trust the situation at all. And I agree with you, CK. If it was the IRR, if it was any other, like, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a bash on 411 necessarily. It's not a bash on any other organization. It's the fact that this deal even happened in the first place. It could be company X. This is meddling in what is supposed to be a free and fair elections, as it's always been advertised as such. And right now, you've just taken that away.
Big Brother is watching, as the expression went under Orwell's books. Guys, I must move us on to the final issue. We're in the last, I keep saying 10 minutes, but really we are now in the last 10 minutes. If one goes by the traditional 90 minutes of the show. Apologies for that. It happens, guys. And again, I must thank my guests, the Friends panel, for indulging me. I didn't even ask. I'm really sorry about that, guys. From one mafia to the other, as I said as a prelude to this story, here's the construction mafia, made famous perhaps in KwaZulu-Natal, where it's most manifest, although it's now springing up in other parts of the country, the Western Cape, also now seeing spates of this where gangsters are getting involved. What is the construction mafia? These are individuals who basically, understanding the promise, the entitlement of empowerment legislation in this country, which demands that certain contracts, 30% of which be outsourced to what should be small up-and-coming companies, to empower them. These mafia cartel type guys now use force and violence to basically demand their cut, if you will, of projects that often even sometimes have nothing to do with them. Here you are, a contractor awarded a contract to build a school in Umlazi. This is a real case, by the way. To build a school in Umlazi, or to extend a school in Umlazi. The moment you set up shop on site, you begin work, suddenly armed men, heavily armed men, invade the sites and begin to demand that no work happens until the owner of the site gives them 30% of the contract. 30% to do what, you're wondering? At times, Jack Fiddly squats, nothing. It's either called protection money, in inverted commas, or a tribute fee of sorts because they happen to be operating in their area. Let me come to this particular piece, which is the source of this tonight's conversation. It pissed people off. The KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Public Works. Let me just put it on screen. As I'm doing that, please do me a favor, hit that like button. There it is. Combating the construction mafia, the KZN Public Works MEC says, no, we're not going to deal with these guys via law enforcement. Maybe let me go and negotiate with them. Here he is, the MEC Usipho Nkosi, saying they haven't really identified the members of the so-called construction mafia, but confirmed that over 3 billion rand has been lost due to stoppages. Nkosi visited a school that's been blocked from construction work over 7 times by, and this is the euphemism of what they often call themselves, forums. They call themselves business forums that are demanding 30% of the profits. Now, when asked about acting against these forums and opening criminal cases, the MEC says he would rather, quote, negotiate. Quoted as saying, as soon as I have found out who they are and having spoken to them, because I come from a long, strong union background, and negotiations are key. That is, of course, according to the Public Works MEC in KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Nkosi. Koketso, I'm going to come to you then, Dumo. Laugh a minute situation.
Yeah, it's actually quite laughable. I thought on principle you shouldn't be negotiating with criminals, but should rather be putting them behind bars, at the very least on principle. But the fact that he's saying he is going to negotiate is kind of an admission on himself here that he is in bed with criminals. I had an opportunity to listen to him and Mashaba, for instance, and one of the things I liked out of listening to him was how he point blank would say it, that the reason his party will never negotiate with the ANC is because they're criminals. You cannot point the finger at all of society's wrongs at certain or very specific criminal elements, be it the ruling party or in this case the construction mafia, and then as a solution be willing to sit at the table with them in a civilized manner to broker a deal. That is counterproductive, and because they remain unpunished due to their acts, it also means that you are actually condoning their actions. Last thing here is that I believe that him saying he'll negotiate, he'll potentially win here and actually come to a solution of some sort. But we know that the open secret around this will be that, right, they will probably give money to the construction cartels, who will in turn give it back to either himself, his cronies, or his organization as a thank you, which is exactly how the mafia does work, isn't it?
This is what makes the whole thing laughable to, I think, those of us who are law-abiding citizens. If I break the law, I don't get to negotiate with the traffic officer. I mean, I can try and be like, hey, man, I was late for a meeting. Hey, man, I was a little constipated or whatever. But at the end of the day, I know the ticket's coming. The ticket's coming, especially if that officer is, of course, not corrupt. That's the key here, Dumo. If you're not corrupt, you're in no position to be trying to negotiate with someone who's breaking the law. In fact, you're the one saying, no, Chief, I'll give you this ticket. Or in this instance, no, Chief, you'll end up in prison as a construction mafia. Here you are, Dumo, stopping in school children, the poorest of the poor, from accessing bigger classrooms, better equipment, whatever the case may be, because your greedy construction mafia self wants a 30% cut. For what? The ANC is involved in this nonsense. Or am I being hyperbolic here?
That is possible. They could be involved. I also think that, as a libertarian, I'd always say in let's say a private law society, if anyone tries this sort of action in such a society, the security forces that are hired by the company that's building will deal with such people. Because what you're doing is you're causing conflict. You are saying that this person cannot build on his property unless he gives you a portion of the profits. And I'm sorry, that you're causing conflict. And I think given the NAP, then I think the person who's building can use force to stop that from happening. And I think and now the problem is that now the state here is supposed to have a monopoly on force. But no, they're not going to have a monopoly on force. I mean, they're not using that monopoly. What are they going to do? Oh, we're going to negotiate with these guys. That's madness, because you are rewarding the behavior. And the whole point is that these guys are violating the NAP. And if the NAP is violated, you are authorized to use force to stop it. And I think perhaps maybe they are scared of the construction mafia. Maybe their roots run very deep, and then they think the best option is to negotiate. And what's going to happen when you allow something like this to fester? It's going to get worse over time. So I think the MEC has got it wrong. I think the MEC should have said, we're aware of the situation and this is unacceptable, and we are going to ensure that this does not happen again, and we're going to use law enforcement to stop them. He should have said something like that, at least to give citizens hope. I mean, but to negotiate with criminals, in my opinion, I think people who are voting will be like, well, some will say, well, why should I even vote? I mean, if I vote, the party that I vote for will negotiate with criminals anyway, so I'll just sit back. Or some may just vote for another party, Yeah, but it's not good. This is terrible, 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 terrible. You don't negotiate with people who are willing to use force if you don't cooperate, right? You only use force on people who want to cause conflict, and the government is not doing that. Doesn't make sense.
Terence, this is why I have to come to you, because I suppose it reminds me of that famous statement by US President Nixon when asked in a press conference around a burgeoning hostage situation. And he said, quite frankly, we don't negotiate with terrorists. But here you have the South African government today seemingly saying, not only are we going to negotiate, we're recognizing their impact on us, but would rather talk to these guys. It doesn't make sense, Terence, because those of us who don't have the firepower of the state, who don't have the firepower of criminals, are then sitting here and thinking, well, then what's the point?
Well, look, I think what this illustrates is that South Africa is fundamentally, and I wrote this about 15 years ago, it's overregulated and undergoverned, and the situation that you describe becomes very, very comprehensible when you understand just how incoherent and incoherent the state is. Dumo was saying they should signal this is unacceptable. I think the word "this is unacceptable" features in every sort of second press statement. We have an unacceptable level of violence in the country. It's completely unacceptable until we actually accept it, de facto, or what this character is doing, saying, well, we'll accept it. In fact, I see now that earlier today they said no, they're sending this stuff off to law enforcement. It's like, how long has this construction mafia been deconstructing construction? It's like, there's something that would be quite funny about this if it wasn't so tragic. Well, I mean, like I'm mentioning about South Africa, you can laugh or you can cry, and generally speaking, sometimes a nervous laugh is just the best response. By the way, as far as negotiating with traffic officers, it depends on the circumstances. I was once stopped, and the officer in question tried to initiate negotiations with me. And he was very put out, and I said, look, just give me the ticket and I'll drive on. No, but and anyway, we can see exactly where that one was going.
Could drink, Terence.
No, I mean, I was a good citizen. I didn't pay. I tried to challenge him, say, what exactly do you want from me? Say it. Say the word, man. Eventually, he just told me to leave without paying a fine. But one group that the last week has proved you cannot negotiate with the VIP protection units. So don't even try.
Guys, we must wrap up. Joe, I'm going to give you the final say here. And also in your final say, how do the folks get in touch with you? Joe, I suppose at the end of the day, we're being asked here to put up with criminality. That's effectively what politicians are telling us. To say, you know what, we're not going to, you vote for us in order to marshal state power to protect your life, liberty, and property rights. But really, we're not going to do that. And there could be various reasons for that. It could very well be that these politicians are in bed with these construction mafia types. It could very well be that they're afraid of them, as Dumo suggested. But what Terence is quite right in also pointing out, this is not a new phenomenon. The very fact that it's spreading across the country to the Western Cape, where people are dying on these sites, by the way, people are shot and killed on some of these construction sites. They target certain individuals, they threaten their families, and they've become an organized crime syndicate in a sense. The question I want to ask to you, Joe, is the state's failure here. Why hasn't the Hawks, for example, designated these guys a priority crime category in order to go after them as a syndicate? Or various syndicates, as they very well may be. And secondly, why are we being asked to look to tolerate this? Why is criminality in this country something we're being asked to tolerate?
Yeah, I don't think we're being asked to tolerate it. I think we're being forced to tolerate it. I think I've always had this theory that the level of crime that South Africa experiences on a daily basis and all the bad news that we hear time and time again, every time we open up our newspapers or we switch on the news, or if you watch any one of our shows, we have a lot of bad news. Just in this show alone, there's 3 horrible headlines. And I think to some extent, South Africans are desensitized. I think that's it. It's like desensitized to the point where either one, they don't care anymore because they're so busy trying to live that they couldn't care less about what's going on or what the president is doing or what he said this time or who's going to invade or what have you. And those that do kind of care are just like hurtful. Like they're just like, oh well, here we go, guys. Someone else died, and more corruption is happening, and nobody's doing anything. Almost like a hopeless attitude more than anything else. And then it becomes tolerant because eventually you start hearing all these headlines, which anywhere else in the world people would freak out. And in South Africa, it's like, well, TIA. This is Africa. It's just how it is. And I think it's been forced upon us. I think it's something that has happened over time. I think it's something that South Africans have just gotten used to. Like it's okay, it's the way it is, And I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm still one, and Sikhle, Dumo, Koketso, all of us, Terence, are the ones that Terence writes about it in his articles. Dumo and Koketso present a show, and Sikhle, you talk about it every day, and so do I. We try and wake up South Africans to say, hey, this isn't normal. I know that over time, it's kind of happened over time, and you feel like it's okay. Like, look at load shedding. Load shedding is a perfect example. In 2007, it happened once, I think, for a month or two. Over the years since then, it's gotten more and more. Every year, slightly more, until we're at stage 6. When 6-7 years ago, stage 6, people used to laugh like, it's never going to get to stage 6. Now we've hit stage 6, and people are like, it's never going to get to stage 10, or it's never going to get to stage 8. It will. It more than likely will, because there's no. Don't be fooled by what's happening now with load shedding. It probably will get a lot worse. And that's just one example of how, it started at a certain level. It got slowly got worse, and we've just been okay with it. But anywhere else in the world, if it was Europe or if it was America or China or wherever, people would not be happy. People would not just sit around and be like, well, I got load shedding. Well, I guess, this is South Africa. Just going to deal with it because, and that's the thing. South Africans are very resilient people, but I think they've forgotten. I think South Africans, to a certain extent, have forgotten that they do have a voice, and they're allowed to speak out, and they're allowed to show their frustration. And unfortunately, a lot of the riots that do happen are not even televised that much. There's riots almost every day in South Africa, and that isn't even spoken about because the media is also complacent in this by trying to make you look over here instead of looking over there at the actual problem. And they're very good at doing that. So yeah, I don't think we're being asked. I think we're being forced to be complacent. And you can also find me on my website, www.joemilio.co.za. I have a one-man show coming up, Crossing the Borders, directed by Barry Hilton. Please go buy a ticket if you're in the Cape Town area. Specifically Somerset West. It'll be at the Playhouse Theatre in Somerset West. Other than that, you can also find me on my YouTube channel. I try and upload almost every day. Bit of a difficult because I have a 6-month-old and she keeps me quite busy. But hopefully I'll be putting up some new content very, very soon. And once again, Sikhle, thank you so much for having me on the show. Always enjoy it. Terence, good seeing you again, as well as Koketso, Dumo, the Supreme Victory Gang. Always fun hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Sikhle. We'll try to read your lips.
Koketso. I think he's saying Koketso.
You're next.
Okay. Well, assuming that he's saying my name, is it really that easy to lip read? But yeah, anyway, yeah, guys, always good being on the show. Good being back on Liberty and Friends as well. Great show as usual. And yeah, I think maybe my final parting words is, I think everyone, I know there's the appetite for bad news isn't that great, but do consume the news. I think it's important that we actually inform ourselves or make conscious efforts to inform ourselves through alternative media platforms. And by that, I'm even including YouTube channels from the IRR, Daily Friend, Center of Risk Analysis, all the other alternatives where you can actually get some element of critical analysis on the on the world around us and what's happening in our country. I think it's very important. Otherwise, you remain ignored, and that's exactly what the politicians want, for you to believe them instead of believe the single version of the truth.
Koketso, how do those folks reach you?
Probably the best way to reach me is reach out to me on Twitter. I'm fairly active there, even when I am, how do I put it? Even when I'm on the road, let me put it like that. So yeah, reach out to me on Twitter. Otherwise, type the name in the YouTube search bar and check me out at the ManPatria website as well.
That's Koketso Resane, co-host of the ManPatria show. Let me go to Terence Corrigan. Terence, how do the folks reach you? Daily friend, of course. What can we expect coming up?
There's a piece tomorrow about the NHI. My regular columns on Monday. Then there's just stuff that sort of blankets the media elsewhere whenever the writing fever takes me. Plus, there's the Daily Friend show at 1:00. I'm a regular feature there. And I always like to tell people, as I said to my group of matrics, read me because I'm always right, and then read stuff you don't agree with, because it's important. It's because it's important to know that people do believe different things. It's not a sin.
Absolutely. That's, of course, Terence Corrigan from the Daily Friend and the Institute of Race Relations. Please check them out at dailyfriend.co.za. Dumo, final word. What can we expect on ManPatria podcast in the upcoming week?
Right. So I'm working on new content. So when I'm ready with it, I will let you guys know. But yeah, if you guys want to, follow me, I'm on Twitter at Dumo Denga. You'll find it. Very easy to find. And just keep a lookout. I'm working on some new stuff, and you guys are gonna like it once it's out. And thanks for having me on, Sihle. Much appreciated.
Hey, we're looking forward to that. I know I am, especially as we are cooking in the background, preparing some other stuff for this channel, which will definitely include a lot of the work of about Dumo, Koketso, and the rest of the gang. Let me say thank you to all of them as I get them off screen, thanking each and every single one of them, of course, for having joined us tonight. And of course, thanking you, dear viewer, for having tolerated us and the glitches this evening. Let me just remind you of this. There is a lot of work happening in the background. That's why you're not seeing the Vuganazo show every day. And I must apologize for that, but I will commit to at very least having every Wednesday the Big Daddy Liberty show, every Sunday Liberty and Friends. That'll be the bare minimum that I'll definitely put out because we're literally trying to launch something at the moment, and I'm doing some background work in that regard. And I'm going to be asking you to support the work that we're doing. A lot of you criticize me and say, "Oh, Big Daddy, you're speaking to the converted." You say this show, you're just having fun. And I've always said to you, the work that I do has two components: the air wall and the ground wall. We're working on that ground wall component now, and I'll be asking you to support the work soon enough. So please keep an eye out on that. It should be launching really as of next month if I play my cards right here. But let me not count chickens, as the expression goes. With that being said, guys, thank you very much. A reminder to you on the way out, please hit that like button whether you're watching the simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. And if it is on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Help me reach my goal, please, of 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And of course, guys, remember, this website will become very, very important going forward, especially when that foundation is launched. Or did I use the word foundation? I should give you a little waiting of appetite as to what we're working on. Find me, please, at bigdaddyliberty.com. Guys, with that being said, thank you for watching. And as I always say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.